Welcome to the Adventures in the Sky podcast, sharing inspiring stories to empower you to be dreamers and doers. For the sky's the limit. Proudly presented by Flying Fillies, an uplifting historical adventure book inspired by the women Air Force service pilots, WASP of World War II. As America's female aviation pioneers, the WASP are the original Power Girls. Hi, I'm Christy Hui, author of Flying Fillies. In every episode, you'll hear stories from the WASP, kin of WASP, women aviator pioneers sharing their secrets to success. Their trials and tribulations pave their inner journey to becoming trailblazers. Joining me today is John Marsh, son of a WASP, a woman Air Force service pilot named Marie Barrett Marsh, class 43-7. It's a pleasure to speak with you, John. What a wonderful gathering the WASP homecoming event was in Sweetwater, Texas. And the WASP, as I said, are my personal heroes, and I love sharing their stories. So thank you for coming onto the show. Let's get it started.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to see your interest in the WASP, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Yes. Well, I love your mom's story, and I think every WASP has her unique story. So in this episode, we want to focus on your mom and her story.
Sure.
Not many people, let alone females, were flying 80 years ago. And so as I was learning about these WASP story, what really, really impressed me and got me intrigued was how did this lady get started in the interest of flying? How did they develop that love for flying? And how did she manage to learn to fly back in 80 years ago when it was so costly to take flying lessons? So how about let's start with that.
Well, my mother was in college, and at that time, I think it was World War II was on the horizon, and I think our country realized we didn't have enough pilots to be sufficient. And they started a civilian pilot training program to train pilots to fly. And they mandated 1 out of 10 people should be a female. So she didn't have much money, but that's how she started flying with this civilian pilot training program. So eventually she and her brother bought a small plane. It was a tail dragger. It was really underpowered. It was 50 horsepower, and they flew that and they learned. So, but she did get her training through the civilian pilot training program. From there, they went on to the AT-6. The AT stands for Advanced Trainer. This was the first plane that they flew that had retractable landing gear and a variable pitch prop. And all the WASP loved it. It had 650 horsepower and it was aerobatic. And so all the WASP, if you look at their gold medal, that AT-6 is on their gold medal. That was just one of the planes that they all flew. In addition, after she got out of the WASP, she flew a C-45, which was a light twin-engine plane. She flew a B-26, which was a bomber. She flew the UC-78, which was a twin-engine trainer. And her favorite plane, if you can believe it, was an A-24, which is a Douglas Dauntless dive bomber. And that's the same plane that at the Battle of Midway that turned the tide for the Americans.
Is that the bamboo bomber?
The bamboo bomber is the UC-78. That's a twin.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But the reason it's called that, the metal was in short supply, so a lot of the ribs and behind the skin was made of wood.
Wow. So
there, you still see, years ago, they made planes with wood. You still see some of the experimental planes built using some high-grade woods rather than metal.
Now, I read that your mom flew the B-26.
Yes.
Which had a reputation of being the Widowmaker, along with many, many other colorful nicknames I don't want to repeat here.
Yes.
Did she ever talk about what it was like flying that Marauder?
She never did. No, I never heard. And back then, I wish I could ask these questions to her
Hmm.
today. It's just she's not here to ask. So
Yeah,
we never talked about it much.
I read that only 17 of the WASP were trained to fly the B-26. So your mom was one of the 17s.
Must have
WASP.
been, sure.
Yeah, that's just amazing to think about that.
Oh, it is. It really is. And there was, they trained the WASP, for instance, the B-17, the four-engine bomber that became
Hmm.
a mainstay. I think the Boeing test pilot was killed in that plane, and then the engines were overheating, so that had a bad reputation also. And Paul
Hmm.
Tibbets got a group of female WASP together to fly this plane and land in different bases. And hey, guys, if these ladies can do it, you can do it. So,
That's a remarkable story, John.
oh, it's amazing. One of the stories, and you listen to these stories. I go to
Hmm.
Oshkosh, an air venture, and listen to their stories. At the end of the day, they would go down to the lake near where we stayed, and they'd have their cheese and crackers and talk about their stories. But one of the stories they told was flying in as a pilot, you'd call the airport, say, I'm 10 miles north inbound, request landing instructions. Well, they did that in the B-17. After doing it once or twice, the tower came on the radio and said, would you ladies get off the radio? We're trying to get a B-17 engine. It never occurred to them the ladies would be flying.
Exactly. That is hilarious, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, some of the stories you heard, it makes you laugh.
One of the things that I think through my research that impressed me so much, and I am envious, is the camaraderie they share as a group. Did
Oh,
you hear any
absolutely.
stories that about
Oh,
their camaraderie?
yeah, I could go on and on about that. It just, they were so close. They kept in touch. I mean, they really made best friends. The classmates kept in touch with my mother late in life. She had cancer, and they'd call her frequently. How you doing? So I get teary eyed.
Mm.
But they were close. They were very, very close. They'd go to reunions. They'd hug each other and catch up. How are you? And tell me about your family. You could see there was a lot of love for each other.
Hmm. It's a sisterhood.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so fun being around them. It was just so fun.
And they have this sense of humor too.
Oh, goodness, yes. Sometimes they steal each other's stories. The one that was my story. You can't tell that. So,
I love that. Yeah, I wish I could speak to some wasps, when they're just go back to memory lane and
oh, I know.
reliving, right?
At
Yeah.
one point, there was 25 of them in Oshkosh at that Oshkosh, Wisconsin Air Venture. So I
Mhm.
call it Oshkosh. And the name is actually Air Venture, but it's the big air show in Oshkosh every July. But when they first started going there, a lot of them weren't wealthy. They were making peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. I mean, they were glad to be there, and they were treated like rock stars, but it was a struggle for some of them.
Mm. Did you ever hear your mom talk about some scariest thing she ever did as a wasp or
Well, probably a lot of times flying is just a lot of boredom and
Mhm.
followed by a scare here and there. And I've been down that road. But at one point, I know she said the engines quit. And of course, everybody on the plane was alarmed. But one of the two gas tanks ran out. All she had to do was switch the tank to the other side, and the engines caught, and they went on. But for the people on the plane, it was scary. For her, it was just another
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
So, some of them talked about one of my friends, Shootsy Reynolds. They had her testing an airplane, and they just put a new engine in it, and they hadn't tightened up the bolts. She said it was vibrating so bad when she landed. She was concerned, the engine, what's going on? They found the bolts were so loose the engine was barely hanging on. So they weren't always fixed properly. Let's get it back in the air and let's keep this going. And that's how it was.
Mhm. Nothing can, it's like nothing can stop them.
No, no, they were proud to do this. They were excellent pilots. I found later in life, all the WASPs still love to fly.
Mhm.
My friend Shootsy Reynolds got a, I don't know if you're familiar with the P-51. To me, that was the prettiest, best.
Yes.
And there was a fellow from Texas, Cowden Ward, would bring his P-51 to Oshkosh, and he gave rides to every World War II veteran, including the WASP. So I got to know Cowden, but my friend Shootsy Reynolds got a ride. He said, "What kind of ride would you like? Do you want just a sightseeing flight, or do you want to do some light aerobatics?" She said, "No, I want to do hard aerobatics." So they did loops and rolls for a half hour. She had a big smile on her face when she got out, and she was probably 85 or 90 years old at the time.
Oh, that sense of adventure
Oh, it's
never fades.
well, no, and they still love to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go to the homecomings. There, a pecan plantation hosted the WASP. It's near Sweetwater, and one of the fellows in there had a plane called the Breezy, and it's basically an open cockpit. There's no fuselage. You just sit out there almost like on a lawn chair. But the WASP waited in line to get on the ride on that plane. I mean, I went for a ride on it. Kind of scared me. I don't like heights if you can go being a pilot, but yeah, they still love to fly.
That's pretty remarkable. What are some of her favorite memories as a WASP that you've heard over the years?
Well, you know, I wish I could remember even a couple of them. I always felt she was an excellent pilot. The first person I wanted to take for a ride when I got my pilot's license was my mother. She just inspired me over the years to do this and move forward and stay with it. And it's a struggle, but boy, I took her up. I was impressed with how good she was as a pilot. You know, once you learn a little about flying, you can tell if the person beside you is a good pilot or mediocre or not so good. But she was an excellent pilot. So some things like that, you have to fly with somebody to see how they fly.
So her love of flying passes on to you.
Oh yes, and then I have another brother that also is a pilot, and I had a sister that she soloed a plane. She never got her private pilot's license. And then I have a niece and a nephew that are both commercial pilots. You may have met Katie Marsh out there at Sweetwater.
That's
She's
right. She did a fly in.
Yeah, she last year she flew in an AT-6 dressed as a wasp. She was a reenactor and flew in the AT-6, and so children were asking her for her autograph. It's like wow. And this year
Nice.
she came in. She brought her baby with her this year. She has a 6-month-old baby, and baby was in a flight suit, just looked like the WASP uniforms they used to wear. It was too big and had to be
On the
rolled up.
plane with her?
Yeah, this year she flew commercial. She was not the pilot. She was a passenger in the back, but they flew
Mm.
up from Key West. That's where she spends her winters.
A
So
baby in a baby wasp pilot
yes.
suit. Love it.
Oh, she's already got the WASP uniform and the fifanella on the baby and a patch with her name on it. I mean, you can tell this baby's going to be a future pilot.
Exactly. um, you said that your mom really didn't talk much about her own experience as a WASP.
Well, they just said we just did what we had to. I felt all the ones I met were very humble. It's just
Mm-hmm.
we just did what we had to. No big deal. In fact,
Right.
I thought everybody growing up, their mother was a pilot. She's not. So what? We flew. I thought it's nothing of it.
Right. It's another day flying.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what it was for them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find it striking was how humble they all are.
Oh, they were so humble. They were just, and you'd go to Oshkosh with them. You know, for a while there, I was driving them to their talks in a golf cart, and people, man, I want to shake your hand, and they were just, no, we just did what we had to. It always impressed me that they're literally like a rock star at Oshkosh. When I went with Shootsy to some of these events like Oshkosh or at homecoming, people in the airport would come up, especially female commercial pilots. They would come up and say, "I want to shake your hand. You open these doors for us." And even one of the TSA agents, she was crying. She said, "I hoped I got to meet a WASP." So what an experience. I mean, I took this for granted, sort of traveling with them and being friends with them. And my mother was a WASP, but to other people, they were very, very special. They never met a WASP, just like yourself.
Did you think that if the WASP program wasn't so successful during World War II, that there would be no women flying for the military today?
Not really. And the reason I say that, I think it was, oh, let me see the year. There was a year when the military announced women were finally going to be able to fly military planes. I think that was 1976. And they got a lot of pushback when the WASP heard that. It kind of stirred the nest a little bit. They came out and said, "No, we did this in World War II, and you're not the first." So they were quiet until you pushed on them, and then they pushed back. So I really believe but the military pilots, the female pilots of today, they really appreciate the WASP. A lot of them know about it. Versus, I was surprised in 1976 the Air Force didn't know about it.
That's why we're doing this.
Oh, I know. I'm always.
This is great. Yeah.
I've met pilots at air shows that are in their 60s or 70s. I had a little pin on my ball cap. It was the same pin that was on their uniform. It says WASP. And I put that on my ball cap. And the guy, a pilot at an air show, asked, "What's that stand for?" I said, "Well, what do you think it stands for?" He says, "White Anglo-Saxon Protestant." I said, "No, not at all." So for me, it's a chance to tell these people that never heard of the WASP, but they did.
So how did being a WASP change her life, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly it gave her a lot of opportunities, and she continued to fly after she left the WASP. And I look at later in life with the friendships she had. But, she went back, like a lot of them, they went back to being a homemaker or doing what they were doing. I mean, someone in the WASP program told the ladies with the speed and the high altitude, they might not be able to conceive. Well, this was Jean McCreary. She says, I showed them, I went home and had 10 kids.
And your mom had?
She had 8 children. So she was obviously very busy raising 8 children. But she had time to fly, occasionally. And again, I always enjoyed flying with her. Yeah,
the WASP certainly proved people wrong on many fronts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, back then, many of the WASP did not know how to drive a car, but they're flying these very complicated military planes.
You got to be kidding me.
No, oh no. I remember one of them telling me, "Would you go move that truck for me?" And she's like, "I can't drive that. It's a stick shift. I don't know how to do it."
Now that's the first for me to hear.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I still discover all these wonderful things about the WASP.
Yeah, they can't drive a car.
Growing up, what's the best piece of advice that your mom gave you or your siblings?
Oh, just don't give up. Stay with it. Stay focused. And so, it was, as a child, you don't always listen to your parents. You're going to learn, make some mistakes on your own, but she was a great mother.
Must be that sense of adventure. Must be so much fun.
Oh, and I think I've inherited it. I've been a pilot for over 50 years. There's not much I haven't done.
Do you fly commercially or?
No, I had a plane for many years. I would use it to go visit my customers for my business, but I never got a commercial license, but it suited me fine. So it was certainly easy to get in the plane and go see a customer in Charlotte. You could be down there in a few hours, meet with the customer, have lunch, and be home in the afternoon. You couldn't do that driving or commercial.
Do you keep in contact with some of the WASP?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the few that are left. Shootsy Reynolds lived near me. She was a WASP, 44/7. And when my mom passed, she was running the stores for the WASP, and she lived about a half hour away.
Mm.
I think I went down to meet Shootsy. I probably bought one of everything she had, books, pens, memorabilia. But her husband had passed and she never had children. And I say,
Mm.
yeah, let me trim your shrubs. Let's go to lunch. Let's do this. And eventually, I called her my honorary mother. We really got close. So she really inspired me. My wife escorted Shootsy on an honor flight. And, so she really touched my life in so many ways.
Mm. I'd love to meet her, talk to her one day.
Oh, I wish you could. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
not here anymore, but
Oh.
I still wear she she was a silversmith. She learned that after being a WASP. They were down in Panama and she learned silversmithing. And so she had a little shop behind her house where she made silver jewelry, including these WASP wing rings. That's hard to say, WASP wing ring. But anyhow, I wear that with pride. Shootsy and I made it together.
Oh.
And you see, there's I don't know if you had a chance to meet Blaze Jensen. She was a Thunderbird pilot. She was at homecoming. There was a Air Force poster showing her with her helmet and a uniform. If you look close on her wrist, you'd see a bracelet that Shootsy made. She was proud to wear that. She was friends with Shootsy.
Is that the lady who was the keynote speaker at
No, she
homecoming?
was the first F-16 pilot. Blaze was there. Blaze had a beige uniform. I shouldn't say uniform, a beige flight suit on. But Blaze is also on the board of the WASP Museum. Very talented lady.
Mm-hmm. If you had to use 3 adjectives to describe the WASP, what would that be?
Oh, persistent, driven, calm, humble.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't push on them; they'd push back. I mean, they're very gentle, but boy, you start pushing, you're not going to get away with much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were humble to a point, but I've seen them where no, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to. So they were very genteel until you stirred the pot a little.
The steel inside.
Oh yes.
Right there.
One of the stories, Marty Wall was a WASP. She was friends with my mother. I spent time with Marty. She said when she was going into the WASP, whatever air base she was located, they were going to give her a physical. And this general said, "I don't believe women should be flying." And she said, "I don't believe that's your decision to make. I'd appreciate if you'd pass along my physical." And he said, "Young lady, you don't talk to a general like that." So anyhow, he did push her paperwork along, and she did become a WASP. But certainly there was resentment, and I can see, you've got men in a barracks. What do we do with this lady?
Sure. It was a different time.
Oh, sure it was.
Discrimination. There's a female role and the traditional view of what female should do, and
yes,
and I think that's why I admire these women so much. It was that they did it 80 years ago when the world was very different.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so, they really proved that they could do this. Their safety record was as good as the men. I think they flew 60 million miles, and so they certainly proved they could do it. And I always felt, me personally, I think women make better pilots than men. I think they're more careful, and when you're flying the airplane, you don't force this thing. You don't manhandle it or whatever the word is I'm looking for. You're gentle on the stick, and I think women they make better pilots. And I've said that to people. They say, "Why would you say that, John?" I said, "I believe that." So it's just my opinion. And
in your family, you have what, 3 women pilots? Yes,
my sister was a pilot.
Oh yes, so
brother that was a pilot, and then me, and then my other sister became a flight attendant for TWA when she got out of college.
That's right, Kathleen.
Right. You might have met Kathleen
I met her with the armadillo race. She was a grand champion. Yes.
What an honor.
Holding down the armadillo wasn't that easy. She made it look easy though. Yes. Well, that's amazing. Well, I am thrilled to have talked with you and for you to share your Sunday with me.
Well, I so appreciate you asking these questions and your interest in the WASP.
May the spirit of the WASP live on and inspire all of us and our future generations.
So agree. So agree.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening to the Adventures in the Sky podcast. To all of you dreamers and doers, believe in your dreams. For when you dream and do, the sky's the limit. Until our next story, unlock your extraordinary within and live inspired. To join the Flying Fillies Adventure Club, visit www.flyingfillies.com.